Hello, my name is Brandon Devnich from Pegasaas.com. I am the founder and primary developer for the Pegasaas Accelerator WordPress Web Performance Optimization plugin. This is our weekly recap for version 2.2.13. This is a non-critical update, so if you're watching this video and thinking, do I need to update? Go for it. But it's non-critical. If your website or your installation is operating just fine, chances are you don't need this. This resolves 3 issues which were non-typical. I'll roll through them and then I'll cover the feature update that we also included in this version. So the first issue was when on your permalink structure in WordPress, typically you use what's called, I think it's the posts option. That's the most common one. What we found is that on this one installation, it didn't have the trailing slash. In all the WordPress sites I've ever seen, I've always seen a slash. Of course, there's always a possibility that that could be different. So what was happening was that the cache files, the optimized pages, were not storing to the right location, and it would appear as though the installation would hang because it didn't have an optimized page. It didn't find the optimized page once it was returned to the site, and subsequently it couldn't then grab the page speed score for the optimized page because, again, it couldn't find it, and it would just sit there spinning at 97% or whatever it is, the very final step. So we resolved that, and the installation was able to be complete. The next issue was an issue where the website was within a folder that had a space in the name. And now it's not very common to have that, especially on a Linux environment. Most web servers prevent that from happening. They'll say, hey, you got to have a dash or an underscore when creating the folder that your website is stored in. Most control panels just will not allow a space. In this one situation, it was somehow allowed. It actually took quite a bit for us to convince our web servers to let us put a space in the name. In any case, we wanted to make sure that it did work in this scenario, and we were able to create a folder for our WordPress installation that had a space in it and was able to reproduce the issue, the installation issue, and then our solution was pretty straightforward. We just changed the .htaccess instruction by wrapping the instruction in quotes. Pretty straightforward once we knew what we were looking at. The last issue, again, is a unique, we've only seen it in a couple situations, but I can see where it could be on multiple installations, and that is when the web hosting environment is set up such that it instructs the web server to not use the WordPress 404 handling, the page not found handling, for static resources such as CSS, JavaScript, and images, which is actually really smart because every time that you engage a resource and it's not there, it has to pull from the WordPress system to connect to the database, connect to PHP, and that ties up server resources. When in reality, for a static resource, just throwing the standard not found server response page is adequate enough. And in fact, it means that your load time would be faster if a resource was not included on your web server for whatever reason. Unfortunately, for the way that we optimize resources on the fly, we look for that 404 handler. And when that 404 handler is disabled for static resources, when we go to optimize a CSS file, we look to see, we're anticipating that we're using the 404 handler. The solution was fairly straightforward once we determined what the problem was, and we just included our own small htaccess file within the Pegasaas cache folder, which basically routed everything through so that we could then again use that WordPress handler for our requests. Because essentially what happens is that when an optimized resource is requested for the Pegasaas system, it looks to the Pegasaas cache folder, and if that resource, say the CSS file, doesn't exist yet, it goes and grabs the original version and then does its transformations and minifications to it and then stores it in the folder. Again, if there's no 404 handling for static resources, we can't go and process those optimizations on the fly. So this now fixes that. Again, I think we've seen this maybe twice in the last couple months. Doesn't mean there's not going to be more installations for that, so we did want to cover it. Again, a very rare situation, but it makes sense that some web hosts would disable the 404 handling for those static resources. And then the very final update to this version was that we added in the ability to exclude certain images from the lazy loading system. So lazy loading is critical to a fast loading web page. If you loaded, say you had 7, 10, 25, 100 images on your page, it takes a long time for every one of those resources to load. You really only need the images that are above the fold, so basically in the frame when you load up your web page. How do you determine that? Well, you set all the images to basically be a placeholder, and then as soon as the web document loads, you do a test to see whether or not that object is within the viewable region, and if it is, swap it in for the original image. The trouble is that there are some situations, albeit rare, some situations where some users may not want a certain image lazy loaded. Maybe they're doing some sort of behind the scenes transformation with JavaScript. Again, strange and unusual, but we've had requests for this, and we've seen it in 1 or 2 situations where it's best not to lazy load 1 or 2 images that are above the fold in a web page. And so we added the ability in the settings panel to specify the name of an image that you don't want to lazy load, either for foreground images or for background images. So pretty happy to have that one now done. That's sort of been on the books for about a month. We had the request come in about a month ago, and then we saw another situation this week where there was a need to have this feature, so we decided to just go and get it done. And that concludes version 2.2.13. We're going to be working on next week further compatibility for when CloudFront is used, CloudFront being a CDN system. When CloudFront is used in conjunction with another third-party caching plugin like Lightspeed. Now, typically we say you should not be running additional caching plugins at the same time as Pegasus. It handles everything. It handles all that caching. And when you add a second caching plugin to the mix, Pegasus has to communicate with that second caching plugin to make sure that we can optimize the correct content and then store the correct content. There are arguments to keep the other caching plugin available, such as with Lightspeed. It accesses cache in a slightly different way on the server, and in theory could be marginally faster by a couple hundred milliseconds. But there's the complication of communicating with it. And then if you throw Cloudflare, my mistake, Cloudflare, not CloudFront, Cloudflare at it, you have now 3 systems trying to control the cache. And it's a big tug of war. Now we can deal with one, such as we can deal with Cloudflare, very easily. And we can deal with another caching plugin like Lightspeed. However, when you have 3, it becomes a tangle. And so we're going to be looking at ways of mitigating that issue. We would like to still remain to be compatible with one or the other. If we can get the triangle working together, the 3 of us working together at the same time, we would like to do that. We really don't like saying we're not compatible with plugin A, B, or C. There is an argument for not running more than one plugin of the same sort of purpose. And in fact, there are a number of plugins out there where we say, just don't do it for a couple reasons. First of all, it's this tug of war. I want to do this. No, I want to do this. And then there's you have 2 plugins that are doing the same thing. You're duplicating the amount of processing that is happening in theory. And that's just a waste of energy. And then if there's a conflict with what one is expecting and what, what we're expecting from the content and what another plugin might be doing, it means that, the content is not going to be compatible. And so we want to make sure that we have a we're not going to be able to perform what we could be doing if we just disable that other plugin, redundant plugin. In any case, that's what we're going to be working on in the next week. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you found this helpful, and stay in touch. Subscribe to us on YouTube or on Facebook at where you saw this video, and keep up to date with what's going on. Thanks so much.